Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at something a little different.
Yeah, a little out of the ordinary.
We get source material sometimes. That's just so interesting. We kind of have to take a deep dive into it, and this is definitely one of those.
Absolutely. And this one focuses on a single individual,
Okay.
a Cantonese-speaking internet influencer named Martin Owie,
Mm-hmm.
also known as Sai-Chak Wang.
Okay, so we're talking about one person here.
Yeah. And what makes this case so interesting is it's not just about, someone posting cat videos
Right.
or makeup tutorials or something like that. This really delves into some serious issues like freedom of speech, online misinformation,
Yeah.
and even potential legal issues, all stemming from this guy's online activities.
So it sounds like we're going to be talking about some pretty heavy stuff today.
Yeah, definitely.
And what about the source material for this one?
Well, the source material is actually a first-hand account from a Hong Kong native who is now living in Germany. And they're deeply concerned about Owie's influence online within the Cantonese-speaking community.
So we've got some pretty serious allegations here.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's start unpacking this whole thing. Who exactly is Martin Owie, and what's he doing online that's raising these red flags?
Well, like I said, he's an internet influencer
Okay.
based in Dusseldorf, Germany.
Okay.
And he has a YouTube channel under his own name.
Mm-hmm.
He produces daily videos targeting Cantonese speakers.
Yes.
And it's the content of these videos that has our source really worried.
All right, so what's he talking about in these videos? Like, what kind of content is he putting out there?
Well, he's known for promoting what many would consider to be anti-Chinese sentiments,
Okay.
specifically targeting the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP.
Okay.
He also shares a lot of what our source describes as conspiracy theories and fabricated stories.
So we've got anti-CCP rhetoric, we've got conspiracy theories, we've got potentially made-up stories. I mean, that's a pretty potent mix, right? Especially if he's got a large audience.
Right, and that's one of the things that our source is really concerned about, is the size and the dedication of his following.
So what kind of following does he have?
He's cultivated what our source describes as a cult-like following.
Wow, cult-like. That's a strong word.
Yeah, they allege that his followers just accept his pronouncements without question, and they actively attack anyone who dares to criticize him.
So it's not just about him expressing his opinions.
Right.
It's about this potential silencing of anyone who disagrees.
Exactly.
And this is where that whole freedom of speech issue comes in.
Right.
Like, is he exploiting freedom of speech to promote harmful behavior?
That's the central question here.
Yeah.
Our source argues that he is weaponizing that freedom of speech to create what they call a chilling effect.
A chilling effect.
Yeah, where people are afraid to speak out against him for fear of being targeted by his followers.
Oh, so they're basically intimidated into silence. So it's not just about what Owie himself is saying, but it's also about the actions of his followers and whether he's encouraging those actions.
Exactly.
So how's he doing that? Is he like directly telling them to go harass his critics?
Well, according to our source, he publicly accuses anyone who disagrees with him.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes he even reveals personal information about them,
Oh, wow.
which is then used by his followers to launch these coordinated attacks.
That's alarming. If that's true, that's a whole other level of potential harm.
Yeah.
Are there any specific examples of this kind of behavior?
There have been documented cases where people have publicly criticized Owie and then faced a barrage of online abuse,
Okay.
including threats and doxing,
Wow.
shortly after being mentioned by Owie in his videos or posts.
And on what platforms is he doing all of this?
He primarily uses YouTube for his videos, but his influence extends to other social media platforms as well,
Right.
where he interacts with his followers and shares additional content.
Okay, so we're not just talking about YouTube here. This is across multiple platforms.
Right.
So it sounds like the impact of his words is very real and very immediate.
Definitely.
And it seems like he's deliberately blurring the lines between expressing his opinions and actively inciting harm against people who just have different views.
It's a very fine line.
Yeah. And it's not just about online harassment either. Our source also mentions some concerns about potential financial impropriety.
Oh, right. Yeah. The source alleges that Owie profits from selling European-made masks to his followers in Hong Kong.
Really?
Yeah, and when customers complain or haven't received their orders, he retaliates by publishing their personal information online.
Hold on. So he's not just making money from his online content, but he's also potentially running some kind of side business that might be exploiting his followers?
That's what the source is suggesting.
That's pretty messed up if it's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this individual, Martin Owie, creating inflammatory content, potentially inciting online harassment and maybe even running this questionable side hustle. But how widespread is his influence, really?
It's significant.
Okay.
I mean, one of his predictions actually prompted some of his followers to make some pretty major life decisions.
What did you predict?
He claimed that Hong Kong will be locked up.
Locked up?
Yeah, he was urging his followers to leave before it was too late.
And did that happen?
No, Hong Kong was not locked up.
Okay.
But his predictions still caused some of his followers to emigrate from Hong Kong,
Wow.
relocating to places like the UK,
Huh?
Germany, Australia, Canada.
And they actually left Hong Kong based on this prediction.
Yeah, and he even encouraged them to transfer large sums of money abroad, which led to some of them facing scrutiny for potential money laundering.
So his rhetoric, whether he intended it or not, had real-world consequences for his followers, some of whom made significant and possibly irreversible decisions based on what he was saying.
It really highlights the potential danger when someone with a large and dedicated following spreads misinformation or makes these unsubstantiated claims.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, and we've only just scratched the surface of this complex and concerning situation. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll explore some of the broader implications of Owi's actions and how this whole thing relates to the challenges of balancing freedom of speech with the need to protect people from online harassment and misinformation. Okay, so we've established that this guy, Martin Owi, he's got this big online presence, and his content is raising some serious red flags.
But
This isn't just like some isolated case, right? This story, it kind of touches on some bigger trends that we're seeing online, especially when it comes to politics and the spread of misinformation.
Oh, absolutely. Owi's activities, while they are unique, in some ways they do reflect some of the bigger challenges that we're facing in the digital world. I mean, the rise of social media, it's given people these huge platforms to reach vast audiences.
Right.
And that power can be used for good or for bad.
And in this case, it seems like he's using that power to push a very specific agenda.
Right.
One that's rooted in anti-CCP sentiment, which is a powerful motivator for a lot of people, especially those who have been directly impacted by the CCP's policies.
Yeah, that's a really important point to consider. I mean, we're not here to delve into the complexities of Chinese politics or the validity of any particular viewpoint.
Right, of course.
But it is clear that Owi's rhetoric, it resonates with a certain segment of the Cantonese-speaking community, many of whom are Hong Kong natives, who may have experienced firsthand the challenges of living under CCP rule.
So it's not just about the content itself, but it's also about the emotional context in which it's being received.
For someone who's already feeling disenfranchised or distrustful of the CCP Owi's message, it might seem validating even if it's based on misinformation or exaggerated claims.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that's what makes combating misinformation so tricky, right? It's not always just about presenting the facts. It's about understanding the underlying emotions and motivations that make people susceptible to certain types of narratives.
Right.
This also makes me think about the role of cultural differences in how we perceive online behavior. You know, what might be considered acceptable or even humorous in one culture could be deeply offensive or threatening in another.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. The internet, it's blurred geographical boundaries, but it hasn't erased cultural differences.
Right.
What Owi might consider assertive or provocative could be interpreted as aggressive or even dangerous by people from a different cultural background.
And then on top of that, you've got the fact that we're dealing with a multilingual online space.
Oh, yeah.
The nuances of language, they can easily be lost in translation, which can lead to misunderstandings and misinterpretations.
Absolutely. When you add language barriers to the mix, the potential for misinformation to spread and for harmful content to go unchecked, it just explodes.
It's almost like playing a game of telephone.
Yeah.
Where each whisper distorts the original message even further.
Exactly.
And speaking of distortion, our source alleges that Owi isn't always truthful.
Right.
That he actually fabricates stories to support his claims. Is there any evidence to back that up?
Well, it's tough to definitively prove or disprove every claim made online.
Sure.
But there have been times when Owi has presented information that's been debunked by fact-checking organizations or contradicted by credible sources.
Okay.
It's also worth noting that he rarely, if ever, provides sources for his claims.
So there's no way to really verify what he's saying?
Makes it difficult.
So we have to approach everything he says with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Right.
But how do we do that without falling into the trap of just dismissing everything we disagree with as fake news?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. We need to develop critical thinking skills, Learn how to evaluate sources, look for evidence-based claims, and be wary of information that seems overly sensationalized or designed to provoke a strong emotional reaction.
It sounds like media literacy is more important now than ever.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially for younger generations who are growing up immersed in this online world.
Yeah, they need the tools to navigate this complex information landscape.
They need to understand how algorithms work, how to identify bias, how to recognize the techniques that are used to manipulate opinions and spread misinformation.
And it's not just about protecting ourselves from being manipulated, right? It's
I
also
hear.
about recognizing the harm that we might be causing by unknowingly spreading misinformation ourselves.
Yeah, we all have a responsibility to be mindful of what we share and to consider the impact that our words might have.
So it's about being responsible digital citizens.
Exactly, not just passive consumers of information.
Right. We need to hold ourselves accountable for the information we consume and share, and we need to demand accountability from the people who create and distribute content online.
Absolutely.
And that brings us back to Martinoe. I mean, he's not just expressing his opinions, he's building a platform, he's cultivating a following, and he's potentially profiting from the content he's creating.
Right.
And he's doing it in a way that's causing real harm both online and offline.
His actions go beyond simply expressing his views. He's actively using his platform to influence others,
Yeah.
and the consequences of that influence are becoming more and more clear.
And those consequences have even led to some legal troubles for him.
Oh, that's right. In addition to the allegations of harassment and potential financial impropriety, OE is also facing legal scrutiny from Hong Kong's Independent Commission Against Corruption.
Yeah.
The ICCC,
Wait, so he's not just facing criticism online, there are actual legal ramifications for his actions.
yes, the ICC has issued a warrant for his arrest, accusing him of inciting a boycott of the 2023 District Council elections. He apparently shared a video and social media post discouraging people from voting.
So this isn't just about online arguments or hurt feelings.
Right.
This is a potential criminal offense.
It definitely raises the stakes and adds another layer of complexity to this whole case.
Yeah, it does. And it also highlights the challenges of enforcing laws in the digital age, where jurisdictions are often blurred and people can operate across borders with relative impunity.
It really makes you wonder if our existing legal frameworks are adequate to address the unique challenges posed by online platforms and the individuals who wield influence within those spaces.
It's a question that lawmakers and legal experts are grappling with all over the world.
Absolutely.
How do you balance freedom of speech with the need to protect individuals from online harassment and misinformation?
Right.
How do you hold individuals accountable for their online actions when those actions have real-world consequences?
Tough questions.
Yeah, these are complex questions with no easy answers, but they're questions we need to confront as the lines between the online and offline worlds continue to blur.
This case with Martinoe, it really serves as a stark reminder of just how important these questions are.
Before we wrap up this part, I want to touch on one more thing about this story. Owi's claims about his connections to the UK.
Oh, right. The claims about his membership in the UK Conservative Party and his supposed communications with British politicians.
Yeah. What's the story there? Is there any truth to those claims?
Well, Owie has repeatedly claimed that he's a member of the Conservative Party, and he's even shown what he claims are messages from party officials.
Uh-huh.
However, there's no independent verification of these claims.
So it could be a way of bolstering his credibility?
It's certainly possible.
Making it seem like he has influence within political circles?
It's also worth noting that he's never lived in the UK,
Really?
which makes his claims of party membership even more curious.
It's almost like he's constructing this persona, this image of himself as someone with connections and influence,
Yeah,
but the reality might be quite different.
that's a really interesting observation.
Yeah.
And it raises the question of why he feels the need to create this image. Is it simply a matter of ego, or is there a more calculated motive behind it?
That's a good question. We can't know for sure, but it's definitely something to keep in mind as we continue to unpack this story.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this section. We've explored the broader context of Owei's activities, delved into the challenges of combating misinformation, and touched on the legal issues he's facing. Now, in the final part of our deep dive, I want to shift our focus to what all of this means for us, the listeners. What are the takeaways here? How can we apply what we've learned to our own online experiences? As we've been talking about Martinoe and all of his activities online, it's amazing how this one case really highlights the complexity of the digital age. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a microcosm of all the challenges we're all facing as we try to navigate this world of information overload and influencer culture.
What I find really fascinating is how this story intersects with so many pressing issues, freedom of speech, online harassment, the spread of misinformation, the whole power dynamic between influencers and their followers. It's like a real-world example of how these abstract concepts actually play out in a very tangible way.
Yeah. And for me, one of the biggest takeaways is just the importance of critical thinking. We can't just passively absorb information anymore, especially not online.
Right.
You have to question everything, evaluate sources, and be wary of emotional manipulation. It's like we need to develop a whole new skill set to navigate this digital landscape safely and responsibly.
You've hit on something really crucial there. I think it's about becoming more discerning consumers of information.
Yeah.
Just like we wouldn't buy a product without checking the reviews or comparing prices.
Yeah.
We shouldn't just accept information at face value without doing our research.
But it's not always easy, is it?
No, it's not.
I mean, especially when we're constantly bombarded with information from all sides, and it's often presented in a way that's designed to grab our attention and trigger our emotions. It's like we're always being primed to react rather than to stop and think.
That's true. The online environment is often deliberately engineered to exploit our cognitive biases.
Yeah.
To make us more susceptible to misinformation and manipulation.
That's scary.
It is. That's why it's so important to be aware of these tactics, to recognize when someone's trying to play us.
So it's not just about being skeptical of the information itself, but also about being aware of the context in which it's presented.
Right.
The motivations of the person sharing it, the potential impact it might have.
Exactly. It's about taking a step back, pausing before we hit that share button and asking ourselves, what's the source of this information? What's the agenda behind it? And what are the potential consequences of spreading it?
And this applies not just to potentially harmful content like what OE is spreading, but to any information that we encounter online.
Yeah, we need to be more mindful of what we consume, what we believe, and what we pass on to others.
It's about cultivating a healthy skepticism, a willingness to question our own assumptions, and a commitment to seeking out multiple perspectives.
Right. It's not about becoming cynical or distrustful of everything,
Right.
but about being more thoughtful and discerning in how we engage with information.
This whole case with Martinelli has really driven that point home for me. It's a stark reminder that freedom of speech is not a license to spread misinformation or to incite harm against other people.
Yeah, and it highlights the importance of holding individuals accountable for their actions online, even when those actions take place in a virtual space. The digital world is not some lawless frontier. It's an extension of our real world with very real consequences.
Well, this deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me, and I hope it's been thought-provoking for you, our listener, as well. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground, from the specifics of Owi's case to the broader challenges of navigating the digital age.
And while we have explored some serious and concerning issues, I think there's also a note of hope here.
Oh, yeah.
By becoming more aware of the dynamics at play online, by developing our critical thinking skills, and by holding ourselves and others accountable, we can create a more informed, a more responsible, and ultimately a safer digital world for everyone.
Well said. And on that note, we'd like to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this episode has given you some valuable insights and maybe even inspired you to be a more mindful and engaged participant in the online world. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe out there in the digital wilds.